In the late 15th century, a union took place that would reshape the destiny of an entire continent. When Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile joined their kingdoms through marriage in 1469, Spain was not yet the mighty empire that would soon dominate the globe. It was a land fragmented by centuries of war, faith, and ambition. Yet, within a few generations, Spain would rise to command the world's largest empire, stretching from the silver mines of the Americas to the shores of Asia, before sinking under the weight of its own power. The foundations of Imperial Spain were laid upon unity forged through conquest and faith. The final act of the centuries-long Reconquista came in 1492, when Granada, the last Muslim stronghold on the Iberian Peninsula, fell to the Catholic monarchs. That same year, Christopher Columbus sailed westward under their flag, seeking a route to Asia but stumbling upon the Americas. Spain's destiny was suddenly intertwined with the New World, a discovery that would pour rivers of silver and gold into the kingdom's coffers and make it the envy of Europe. But Spain's greatness was not born from wealth alone. As historian J.H. Elliott observes, it was the product of a vision, an imperial mission combining the sword and the cross. Spain saw itself as the defender of Catholicism, chosen by God to preserve Christian unity in a time of rising heresy and doubt. Yet this divine mission carried a heavy burden. From the Inquisition at home to endless wars abroad, Spain's rulers would spend centuries trying to reconcile their spiritual mission with the realities of political power. The 16th century marked Spain's golden age, the age of Charles V and Philip II, of explorers, conquerors, and artists. Charles inherited not just Spain but the vast Habsburg dominions across Europe, stretching from the Netherlands to Italy and even the Holy Roman Empire. He was, in every sense, a universal monarch. Under his rule, Spain became the center of European politics, its armies feared, its fleets unmatched. The Spanish flag fluttered over Mexico and Peru, and the wealth of the New World began to flow into Seville, turning it into one of the richest cities in Europe. Yet, as Henry Kamen points out, beneath the glittering surface of power lay deep contradictions. Spain's empire was built on fragile foundations: social division, religious intolerance, and economic weakness. The influx of American silver, instead of strengthening the economy, brought inflation and dependence on imports. The nobility remained obsessed with honor rather than production, while peasants and artisans bore the crushing weight of taxation. Spain's society of conflict was one in which pride often triumphed over practicality. In the Americas, Spanish conquistadors carved out vast territories with a mixture of audacity and brutality. Hernán Cortés conquered the Aztec Empire, Francisco Pizarro toppled the Incas, and countless others followed, driven by greed and faith. The native populations were decimated by warfare, forced labor, and disease. The Spanish crown attempted to regulate colonial exploitation through the encomienda system and later reforms, but the empire's moral contradictions were impossible to hide. Missionaries like Bartolomé de las Casas condemned the cruelty inflicted on indigenous peoples, revealing the darker side of Spain's so-called divine mission. Still, the flow of silver continued, particularly from the mines of Potosi and Zacatecas, fueling not only Spain's wars but also Europe's growing global economy. Stanley and Barbara Stein describe how silver became the lifeblood of the Spanish Empire. It financed the armies of Flanders, paid for Italian campaigns, and enriched merchants in Antwerp and Genoa. Yet it also tied Spain's fate to the unstable rhythms of transatlantic trade. When the silver faltered, so did the empire's strength. The Spanish monarchy found itself trapped in a cycle of war and debt, dependent on a resource that was as elusive as it was abundant. Philip II, who ruled from 1556 to 1598, sought to consolidate Spain's far-flung possessions and defend the Catholic faith against Protestantism. From his austere palace at El Escorial, he governed an empire on which the sun famously never set. But Philip's reign also marked the beginning of decline. The endless wars against the Ottomans, the Dutch, and the English drained the treasury. The disastrous Armada of 1588, sent to invade England, symbolized both Spain's vast ambition and its growing overreach. Yet Philip remained unshaken in his belief that he was carrying out God's will. To him, empire and faith were one and the same. At home, the Inquisition enforced religious conformity, driving out Jews and Muslims who had been integral to Spain's economy and culture. The result was intellectual stagnation and economic decay. As William Maltby argues, Spain's obsession with orthodoxy and honor blinded it to the practical needs of governance and trade. While other European nations embraced mercantilism and innovation, Spain clung to tradition. Its aristocracy despised commerce, and its bureaucrats multiplied without solving fundamental problems. The empire's vast wealth was squandered on wars that yielded little lasting gain. The 17th century brought further troubles. Spain found itself entangled in the 30 Years' War, fighting to preserve Catholic hegemony in Europe. Meanwhile, rebellion flared in Catalonia, Portugal, and the Netherlands. The once invincible armies of Spain began to suffer defeats, and the empire's territories slipped away one by one. Inflation soared, trade declined, and famine stalked the countryside. The grandeur of El Escorial gave way to the despair of a nation exhausted by faith and failure. Jaime Vikins Vives, in his Economic History of Spain, describes how deeply structural these problems were. Spain lacked a strong middle class, the engine of economic modernization that propelled nations like England and the Netherlands forward. Agriculture remained backward, industry underdeveloped, and fiscal policy disastrous. The monarchy repeatedly declared bankruptcy, and foreign bankers grew rich lending to a crown that could never pay its debts. Spain's economy, once fueled by silver, was now drowning in it, a paradox of wealth without prosperity. Yet, even in decline, Spain retained an aura of majesty. Its culture flourished in what historians call the Siglo de Oro, the golden age of Spanish art and literature. Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, a haunting reflection on illusion and reality that seemed to mirror the empire itself, a grand dream out of touch with the changing world. Painters like Velázquez captured the melancholy splendor of a fading aristocracy, while playwrights like Lope de Vega filled theaters with tales of honor, love, and loyalty. It was as if Spain, even as it decayed, found its soul in art. As the 17th century drew to a close, Spain's imperial system was collapsing under its own weight. The once mighty fleets were rotting in their harbors, the colonies increasingly autonomous, and the royal treasury perpetually empty. The death of the childless Charles II in 1700 triggered the War of the Spanish Succession, a brutal conflict that would decide the fate of Europe's greatest empire. When the war ended in 1714, Spain had lost much of its European possessions and accepted a Bourbon dynasty under Philip V. It was no longer the center of the world but a weakened kingdom seeking renewal. Yet the legacy of Imperial Spain endured. In its language, its faith, its architecture, and its memory. Across Latin America, the marks of Spanish rule remained etched in cities, cathedrals, and traditions. Spain had spread its culture across continents, shaping civilizations from Mexico to Manila. Its empire had created a truly global world, for better or worse, linking Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas in networks of trade, conquest, and exchange. Looking back, historians like Kamen and Elliott remind us that Spain's rise and fall were not simply tales of glory and greed. They were reflections of a profound human struggle, between faith and reason, tradition and change, power and morality. Spain's rulers believed they were defending God's order, yet their empire became a symbol of the perils of overreach. The same silver that built their palaces also buried their future, the same faith that unified their kingdom also stifled its growth. In many ways, the story of Imperial Spain is the story of early modern Europe itself, a continent torn between its medieval past and modern ambitions. Spain stood at the center of this transformation, both leading and resisting it. Its empire connected the world but also revealed the limits of power. It showed that wealth without wisdom, and faith without tolerance, could destroy even the mightiest realm. By the early 18th century, Spain was no longer the global superpower it once had been. But its legacy was not one of failure alone. It had created one of history's most enduring cultural civilizations, whose influence still shapes the modern world. The Spanish language became the bridge of millions, its architecture and art became symbols of beauty and endurance. Even its tragedies left lessons for future generations, lessons about ambition, identity, and the cost of empire. Spain's imperial age began with a vision, the uniting of kingdoms under one faith, one crown, and one destiny. It expanded through conquest and commerce, reaching the ends of the earth. And it declined under the weight of its own contradictions. Yet, from the ruins of its empire emerged a deeper story, a story of resilience, creativity, and reflection. The fall of Imperial Spain was not the end of its spirit, it was the beginning of a new understanding of power, faith, and humanity itself. In the end, Spain's empire reminds us that history is never simple. The same forces that create greatness often sow the seeds of decline. Wealth can corrupt as easily as it can inspire. Faith can unite or divide. And empires, no matter how vast, are built not just on gold and glory, but on the fragile dreams of the people who believe in them. Spain's story, from the triumphs of Granada to the tragedies of bankruptcy and war, remains one of the most remarkable sagas in human history. It is a tale of vision and vanity, courage and cruelty, faith and failure. And though its empire may have vanished centuries ago, its echoes still reach across oceans and time, reminding us that power, like the tides of history, always rises, and always falls.